Moon shining bright temporarily. Welcome to summer in Melbourne. Okay. Could I ask a favour?
No, you know I don't do interviews. I did want to ask you though.
Yeah.
Because you were you not here last year, or did I miss you?
I was away for 6 months last year.
Oh,
I was in America.
Oh.
I'm a US citizen by birth, but I'm an Australian citizen by naturalisation in 1967, and for the first time in my life while I was in the States I voted in a US election in Florida.
Oh, you can do that because you're a citizen.
Yeah, and I decided to vote for Ron DeSantis for governor, and I contributed to his 20% increase in vote. So now my favour is, whenever there is an acknowledgement of the traditional owners and a recognition of the elders, can I ask anyone who does that to also acknowledge the traditional taxpayers of Australia who are paying the bills for this wonderful place and this wonderful vista that we have before us. I would like people to give equal time to the taxpayers of Australia.
No worries.
Thanks very much. Good on you. Have a good one.
Yes, you too. I'm glad you're all right.
It's great to be back. I'm very grateful to Katherine for being prepared to have a chat with me and to express some concerns for my well-being, given that I was absent for 6 months last year. Bill Thompson for Outside Insiders. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mate, I'm just looking at Twitter and people aren't happy. Probin and Koori, thanks, but I've got a packet of needles to insert deep into my eyeballs instead. Why do you think Twitter attracts people with opinions like that?
I think it's become a vile platform.
I'm sure it's been a platform for comment like that for a long time. Welcome to summer in Melbourne again.
Feels like summer.
Mate, may I ask, any time a public servant or a politician acknowledges the traditional owners and pays respects to the elders past, present and emerging, can I ask that they also at the same time acknowledge the traditional taxpayers of Australia who pay all of the public service salaries and put people up in lavish accommodation like this? Is that something that you'd consider? No. Thanks, mate. I'm grateful for Andrew being prepared to have a chat while we were walking. Maybe a year ago I was asking Andrew about just hang on. Mate, can you spare 1 minute? Twitter comment about insiders.
I've been on Twitter for 3 years.
Probin and Koori, thanks, but I've got a packet of needles to insert deep into my eyeballs
awesome.
instead.
I hope they do it.
This is the standard of a lot of the responses to insiders.
I've been on that for years.
It's just...
you know what, Bill? That person will watch the show and just...
probably
and
so.
They'll get off on being angry.
Probably so.
They'll sit there in a lather and flagellate themselves with self-loathing.
Mate, welcome back to Melbourne.
Cheers, mate. It's been a while.
I've been away for 7 or 8 months.
You good?
No, I was in the States and had a Mediterranean cruise and went to WA, so it's been a busy few months. Yeah. May I ask?
Sure.
Anytime you hear an acknowledgement to the traditional owners and paying respects to the elders past, present emerging, could you also say, well, how about we also acknowledge the taxpayers of Australia who pay for all of this and all of this?
Two separate things. But
I would like equal time for us poor taxpayers.
What about the people that don't pay tax?
Well, look, currently I don't.
There's a lot of them.
I don't pay income tax,
Yeah.
but I do pay GST.
I'm sure you paid your share.
I certainly did, and while I was a tax auditor, I helped other people pay tens of millions of tax and penalties that they owed.
Tax auditor.
Yeah, so it was, mate, it was the best 26 years of my life. I enjoyed helping people find taxable income they didn't realise they had. So, mate, I hope you have a great day.
You too, Bill. See you next time, mate.
Yeah, see ya. Thanks to both Andrew and Phil for having a chat with me. I get a kick out of coming around here on Sunday mornings to try and chat with the political guests if they're in the studio, and the journos as they arrive, and sometimes as they leave as well after the show, and just to express a point of view in some cases, and to ask questions. So we'll see how we go. Bill Thompson for Outside Insiders. Good morning, Bill Thompson for Outside Insiders. I was here earlier to try and talk with the panellists and potentially the political guest this morning, the political guest was Treasurer Jim Chalmers. Unfortunately, he appeared by a video link from Brisbane, so I didn't get a chance to chat with him, but had he arrived potentially by chauffeur-driven Commonwealth limo, I was hoping to ask him, why does Labor attract so many crooks, routers, pedophiles, drug traffickers and tax cheats? And I'd refer specifically to Michael Williamson, who apparently stole millions of dollars from the members of the HSU when he was an official, who later became the national president of the ALP, for God's sake. Eddie Obeid, Craig Thompson, Milton Orkopoulos, Michael Coates-Trotter. I've included him because he's married to an ALP minister, and he's a convicted heroin trafficker. Bernard Finnegan, who was before the courts in relation to child pornography. Gordon Nuttall. Brian is Brian Burke, a late addition. Brian Burke, of course, was the Premier of Western Australia for a number of years, and finished up behind bars for rorting money from the system. John Brown I've included because many years ago I read media reports about a court action that he was involved in. According to my reading of the court cases, John Brown, who was tourism minister, was it, back in the Hawke Keating era, and was he also famous for synchronised desk shuffling in Parliament House on one occasion. According to media reports, the tax office had issued an amended assessment in relation to John Brown's tax affairs back in the early 1990s, because he had failed to disclose the receipt of what was purportedly a gift of a $1 million Gold Coast apartment with all furnishings included. The gift was from a property developer who must have been impressed with John Brown's representation up in Queensland. According to the media reports, the tax office, some years after the event, decided to issue an amended assessment to John Brown to include the $1 million gift as assessable income. And my recollection of the reports suggested that the tax that resulted from a addition of $1 million to John Brown's income in the relevant years was about $475,000. And I believe not only was there assessed tax, but there was some penalty imposed as well. Now, the only reason that the matter became public was that John Brown apparently objected to the assessment, and according to my reading of the media reports, the tax office did not allow the objection, and John Brown subsequently appealed the decision, and that's when the matter began to become public knowledge. Until that point, secrecy provisions within the ATO means nothing is supposed to get out. Although I do remember reports of Paul Keating being late getting his tax returns in, hit the news, which appears to have resulted from someone in the tax office or elsewhere making the information available to the media. The matter in relation to John Brown versus the Commissioner of Taxation went on, I think, for almost 10 years before a settlement was finally reached, and the terms of the settlement, as far as I know, have never been made public. But it appears, the fact is, that John Brown failed to disclose the fact that he had received a $1 million Gold Coast apartment. He had failed to disclose the receipt of that in his relevant tax return, and the tax office subsequently took action about it. So that's why I've included John Brown in this list of crooks, routers, pedophiles, drug traffickers and tax cheats. Anyway, I didn't get a chance to chat with Jim Chalmers because he wasn't in the studio this morning. I also had hoped to speak with the journos on their way out of the building. It's now about 10 to 11 and nobody's emerged yet, so I'm going to call it quits. But as I was walking around here at about 5 to 10, near the end of the Insiders program, the journos were asked for their final comments, and Andrew Probyn mentioned that he was just seeing on the internet news that yet another mysterious object had been shot down by the Americans over North America. I had seen it on the news I was walking around, and apparently it was shot down over Canada, and it may or may not have been a device sent from China, from the Xi Jinping PLA regime. But the massive balloon that created quite a stir over America a week or so ago certainly did have its origins in China, and apparently it was a Chinese spy mission. It's of serious concern, of course, that these events seem to be occurring with increased frequency at a time when China is in cahoots with Russia in presumably supply of intelligence and perhaps munitions in the Ukraine conflict, the Ukraine special military operation, according to Vladimir Putin. The media and the politicians never miss an opportunity to bang on about climate change purportedly being the most pressing matter for people to be worried about lately. In my opinion, by far the greatest and most immediate risk to the civilized world is the belligerent Xi Jinping regime, And I seem to recall a US military officer in the media a few days ago suggesting that the way things are going, there may well be conflict with China by 2025. I was a kid in the United States in the 50s and early 60s, and I recall, and I've been a follower of global news for over 60 years. I recall the image of Nikita Khrushchev banging his shoe on the desk, I think it was at the UN in 1960, saying, "We will bury you." The Soviet Union's gone, but the risk remains from Marxist dictators, and in 2023, in my opinion, the most immediate threat to the existence of the planet as we know it is a belligerent Xi Jinping regime backed by the force of the PLA. The other issue, of course, that comes up in relation to climate change is the effect on the corals and the barrier reef. I was reminded this morning of the late 2022 report that indicated that coral cover in the northern and central portions of the Great Barrier Reef currently stands at a 36-year high. And I also remember Tim Flannery's famous 2007 comment that even the rains that fall are not going to fill our dams and rivers. Eastern Australia has been beset by flooding for the last 6 months, thanks to La Nina, which will eventually give way to El Nino. But Flannery, up to date, was dead set wrong. I had a look at the water storage figures across Australia this morning. Sydney and Melbourne water storage is currently about 95% full for both of them. Adelaide's about 75%, Brisbane's about 80%, Canberra's about 100%, Darwin's about 100%, Perth's about 50%, but we are nowhere near running out of water. And as far as Melbourne is concerned, Melbourne's maximum storage capacity is well under that of Sydney and even Brisbane, because partly a then Labor government decided not to build a new dam on the Mitchell River, but instead to build the desal plant on the coast, and I believe they spent $6 billion on that, and it's hardly ever been used. Meanwhile, they could have spent about $2 billion to build the dam on the Mitchell River. Not only would it have provided an increased water storage from Melbourne with an increasing population, but it would have provided recreational facilities in the area too. But the Greens won't let anyone build dams because the fish are using the water. That's enough for me, Bill Thompson, for Outside Insiders.